Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in the Second Chronicles, chapter 24. FYI, I'm still overcoming the flu, so you may see signs of it in my catching my breath every now and then. So. Um, the king Joash, um, in the line of David, and this story is very interesting because he was a good king. He brought great reforms to Israel, except there was one problem. He was a good king because his mentor Jehoiada was a good priest and guided him along the way. And in other words, as long as Jehoiada was there, meaning alive, Joash was a good king. But then when Jehoiada dies, Joash changes. And that's kind of interesting to see how this plays out. That a person has to purpose in their heart to seek God. Yes, mentorships are good, but if it's not in your heart, as we will see, as soon as that influence is gone, then things change. Let me give you a good example. And it's kind of a different way, but we often reflect on what's called the golden years of America. Now, I never really think of America as having golden years. There was a certain way that people lived, but that's a whole other story. What my point is, when you come to the 50s, you see a radical change in America at the beginning of a radical change. Now, at first, you had the culture, the American culture. You can say the Christian Judeo ethic. And again, I don't ascribe fully to that, but I would say it did have its effect. Somewhat, okay? I will question that it was an effect in a certain way, but again, I'm not going to unpack that. My point to that is that, yeah, for a few decades, you had people living a certain way. This kind of fantasy of what American/Christian life should be. And then things changed. You see an eroding of that to where now sin is abounding more in our culture. Okay? Now, again, that deserves more unpacking, but I'm saying this is that, unless righteousness is in our hearts, it's never going to last. Okay, let's get to our study. All right. Okay. I got the wrong screen up. Here we go. There we go. All right. Chapter 24, verse 1 says, Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebiah, and she was from Beersheba. Now listen to this next verse. Throughout the time of Jehoiada the priest, Joash did what was right in the Lord's sight. Now he was really a positive impact on his life. Okay? A positive impact. Excuse me. All right, so Jehoiada required 2 wives for him, and he was the father of sons and daughters. So it's kind of interesting. You see Jehoiada guiding him. As I said, Jehoiada didn't want to be king. He knew he probably couldn't have been king. But he certainly had purpose that he wanted to guide the nation in the righteousness of God. Verse 4 says, afterwards Joash took to his heart to renovate the Lord's temple. So he gathered the priests and Levites and said, go out to the cities of Judah and collect money from all of Israel to repair the temple of your God as needed year by year, and do it quickly. Now the temple had fell into ill repair because, again, the priests were not living right. So they were not taking care of the temple. And like all things, if you do not care for it, structures will erode. However, the Levites did not hear it. So the king called Jehoiada the high priest and said, why haven't you required the Levites to bring from Judah and Jerusalem the tax imposed by the Lord's servant Moses and the assemblies of Israel for the tent of the testimony, for the sons of that wicked Athaliah broke into the Lord's temple and even used the sacred things of the Lord's temple for the Baals. In other words, during Athaliah's reign, she was again very wicked, turning the people towards Baal worship. Verse 8, and at the king's command a chest was made and placed outside of the gate of the Lord's temple. Now, what had happened was that the people were not bringing in the money as they should. They were collecting the money, but it wasn't being delivered to the workers for the renovation of the temple. Then a proclamation was issued in Judah and Jerusalem that the tax God's servant Moses imposed on Israel in the wilderness be brought to the Lord. And all the leaders and all of the people rejoiced. And said, brought the tax and put it into the chest until it was full. Whenever the chest was brought by the Levites to the king's overseers, and when they saw that there was a large enough amount of money, the king's secretary and the high priest's deputy came and emptied the chest, picked it up, and returned it to its place. And they did this daily and gathered the money in abundance. So you see that they would have this big box with a hole in it. You just drop the money in. So that way the people could not. In other words, if you gave the money to the priest, sometimes they had sticky fingers. So if you gave them, let's say using our money, let's say if you gave them 5 $1 bills, maybe only 2 of the $1 bills got into there. So this was the way of keeping everybody honest. Verse 12, then the king and Jehoiada gave it to those in charge of the labor of the Lord's temple, who were hiring stone cutters and carpenters to renovate the Lord's temple, also blacksmiths and coppersmiths to repair the Lord's temple. The workmen did their work, and through them the repairs progressed. They restored God's temple to its specifications and reinforced it. And when they had finished, they presented the rest of the money to the king and Jehoiada, who made articles for the Lord's temple with it, articles for the ministry, and for making burnt offerings and ladles, and articles of gold and silver. They regularly offered burnt offerings in the Lord's temple throughout Jehoiada's life. Now, you will note that he continues to say, throughout Jehoiada's life, because that's getting ready to change, and we're going to see that in a moment. And again, it is kind of a shame that this had to be done in every generation of Israel. Verse 15. Jehoiada died when he was old and full of days. He was 130 years old at his death. He was pretty much an old man. Even when Joash was born. And remember, Joash was 7 years old when he became king. He was actually hidden for 7 years when he was born. When Athaliah seized control of the kingdom. Remember, Jehoiada hid Joash as a baby, and then at 7 installed him on the throne. So anyway, he was 130 years old at his death. God had really blessed this man with some years. Verse 16, he was buried in the city of David with the kings because he had done what was good in Israel with respect to God and his temple. However, verse 17, after Jehoiada died, the rulers of Judah came and paid homage to the king. Then the king listened to them, and they abandoned the temple of Yahweh and the God of their ancestors, and served the Asherah poles and the idols. So there was wrath against Judah and Jerusalem for this guilt of theirs. Nevertheless, he sent them prophets to bring them back to the Lord. They admonished them, but the people would not listen. Verse 20, then the Spirit of God took control of Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood above the people and said to him, this is what God says. Why are you trespassing the Lord's commands? The end you do not prosper. Let me read that again. This is what God says. Why are you transgressing the Lord's commands and you do not prosper? Because you have abandoned the Lord, he has abandoned you. But they conspired against him and stoned him at the king's commands in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. Now this is amazing now. Remember, it was Joash that ordered his execution because he was prophesying. Now remember, when Zechariah's father, let's look at verse 22, read verse 22. King Joash didn't remember the kindness that Zechariah's father, Jehoiada, had extended to him, but killed his son. And while he was dying, he said, may the Lord see and demand an account. Now, a couple of things I want to say before I move on with this. One, this turn of events is so astounding here that Joash would turn so against God, his ways, to the point of being such a wicked ruler. Now, I want you to file this in your mind here when it says, may the Lord see and demand it. Now, notice this prayer in the sense of vengeance. Now, the only reason why I say that, keep this in mind when you read in the New Testament how the New Testament brethren would pray, such as Jesus, right? On the cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he was doing it to those that were murdering him. Stephen, as those that were murdering him, prayed the same prayer. Father, lay not this sin to the charge. The Apostle Paul, as he was expecting to go to his execution, prayed for those that had forsaken him, said, I pray it be not laid to their charge. I just want you to see the contrast here. Excuse me. At the turn of the year, the Aramean army went out to war against Joash. They entered Judah and Jerusalem and destroyed all the leaders of the people among them and sent all their plunder to the king of Damascus. Throughout the although the army came with only a few men, the Lord handed over a vast army to them because the people of Judah had abandoned Yahweh, the God of their ancestors. So they executed judgment on Joash. And even then, Joash did not repent, which is sad. You would have thought, that, hey, you know what, things were good when we were following God. Now they're not. Verse 25. When the Arameans saw that Joash had many wounds, they left him. His servants conspired against him and killed him on his bed, because he had shed the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest. So he died, and they buried him in the city of David, but they did not bury him in the tombs of the kings. And those who conspired against him were Zebad, son of the Amorite woman Shemith, and Jehoshaphat, son of a Moabite woman Shumer. Concerning his sons and the many oracles about him and the restoration of the Lord's temple, are they not written in the book of Kings? And his sons, his son Amaziah became king in his place. A very sad end to Joash, who started out good but ended up wicked. I mean, and that's the kind of the sad part, that he ended up so wicked. I mean, it wasn't that he just turned, but he turned so wickedly against God, killing the priests. So anyway, all right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next study.